Okay, so what I did is that, since that other thing is that I just created some different methods in order to just make things easy. For example, now I have this method generate array, random array, that is just going to, given a size, this 30, this value is going to be the size, is going to initialize an array of that size and then randomly populate that array with numbers between 1 and 100. And then it will return that array. So this returns the array of an int, and it's just going to be put inside this, and I'm going to display the length, how many elements, and then display the array. And then in order for me to calculate the time that the array took, I just use this system nanotime, start time, that I save it here, and then I call the method selection sort descending or ascending. I just have two of these. Now the ascending is going to just do the code that by trying to find the max and put it in the last position, and the last position is going to be array.length -1 the first time, because I is going to be 0 the first time, so it's going to be the last element in the array. So I'm looking for the max and putting it the last, and then as I grows, the last becomes the one before the last, and the one before the last, etc., until I just do that. And for this descending, that means from the largest to the smallest, so I'm looking for the minimum this time, and I'm putting it in the last the same way. So in order for me to look for the minimum, all I have to do is to change this from being lesser than in the max, I put greater than, and then in order to avoid confusion, I rename this to be min instead of max. And that's all I had to do. The rest is exactly the same. Now after I execute this, I call again this system nanotime is going to give us the stop time when this was over, so we can just have the difference between the stop time and the start time in order to divide by 1 billion, because that's what 1 nanosecond is. 1 nanosecond is 1 billionth of a second. I'd like to have it as, you know, some kind of a second thing. So I'm just using printf to do that. You know, you remember we've talked about printf maybe a long time ago, but if you don't, printf works this way. It's like println, except that you can put some kind of code in it, like this here, this code here. Now this f means this is going to be, and this is the text that I'd like to display, and I can put these percentages and something. If I put %d, I'm just saying I'm going to put an int at this position inside the string. So this is going to be replaced with an int that is going to be as a parameter that comes next. If I put the f, %f, I'm just specifying this is going to be a floating point, a float or a double. And if I put something like this, 0.7, which means I would like to have 7 digits after the decimal separator. After the dot, I would like to have 7 digits. I can specify, I can have more control by doing this. If I don't do this, and I use the println, I'd like to show you why I use printf. Because if I don't do that, what I could have done then is do this. I display that, and then plus, and then put this, the s for the seconds, and that's it. Now it's println, and I'm going to display. Now check the result when I did do that. And I display the array again. So I displayed the array first time before, and then after, with the time that it took. You see? This is what I get when I use this println, because this number is so small, so many zeros, it just do this representation, but I didn't like it. So how to make it now work in a different way? Well, I'd like to display the 7 digits after the decimal separator. I just use printf. Now printf does not return to the line, so I'm returning to the line after that. This s is the seconds, and now if I run this thing, you're going to see now this thing here was replaced with the number that is inside this variable. So, and if you count 2, 4, 6, and 7. So I have the 7 digits. If I'd like to have less or more or whatever, I can just put whatever number I want. So that's what this does. Now, why did I do that? Why am I displaying the time? Because I would like also to do this bubble sort and then compare the timing of those two. But I'm not there yet. But for now, before doing this bubble sort, I just would like to make this selection sort work with any object. Now, of course, I just need to check. Can I make this instead of an array of whatever? What is it? This selection sort. Instead of an array of int, do I need to have an array of the object? Can I use object, or I have to be comparable? Now I have two options. If you remember what we did last time with the searching, we did either like this. Let me just remind you by showing it to you actually. When the searching here, what did we do? Now we had two types of searches. This is the binary search and the linear search. And in the linear search, like we had this one that is going to be an object. While the binary search, we said, well, this is the one with an int, but we had something that is going to be comparable. We couldn't use object. Do you remember why we couldn't use object? Because the order is important. I need to check which one comes first, which one is smaller than the other. And that's why I needed to have them comparable. Now here, am I just seeing if they're equal, if some values are equal, or am I looking at them to be one smaller than the other? Well, obviously I'm looking for the max, which means I need to compare which one is the smallest than the other. So if I'd like to generalize that, I cannot make it an object, but I need to make it comparable. Now once I have the array that is comparable, then I can use this compare to. And when I compare it to keep the same side, the same direction of it was less than, right? So just let me copy this and Control Z and do what it was, so you can see it was less than. So in order for me to have the less than, I'm just going to make it keep the same sign in the same direction, just make it 0, and that's how I'm going to keep the same thing. Now the last error here, if I fix it, because this array is an array of comparables, so I just need to return a comparable. Now whatever the comparable is, I'm going to save it into this temp and then swap the positions, and now this array is going to work with any data type that is going to be comparable. Now this is not going to be acceptable because now I need to have something that is comparable. But this generate random number, an array. This one just generates an array of ints. Can I have it to be generate something that is comparable? Well, I can just do this, comparable, and then, well, I need to return something that is here. Okay, I can do that, but then this array of I is not going to be just a value. Well, it's just going to be a new class that I would like to, that is going to be comparable. So, but which one? I don't have any class now. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the same student here. Remember that student that we used? That student, I'm going to just copy and paste it there. And just to remind you, that student, I was using, it implements comparable. So it's going to be a comparable. And so that's now I'm going to have the equals that checks only based on the ID of the student. Now every student has ID, name, and GPA. These are the three instance variables. And then we make sure that these two are going to be equal, how two students are going to be equal if they have the same ID only. We didn't check the rest. Actually, it would be better to check the rest, but we did not want to. Now to make it simple, we just use the ID. And same thing when I compare two students, I would like to compare only their ID. If their ID are equal, I'm going to return 0. If this ID is less than the other ID, I'm going to return -1 and 1 if otherwise. That means if this ID is greater than the other ID. So that's why now I implemented the compare to. You remember last time when we were talking about this, Java is not going to check that you have the same condition in the equals and the compare to. Now, when you return 0 in the compare to, that means they are equal. Now the condition that I'm putting here, it has to be the same than the one that I'm going to put here, that I put in the equals. If I'm not doing that, then my class is not consistent, but Java is not going to check that for me. So you have to do the checking for yourself. But this being said, now I'm having a comparable. I'm just going to generate, instead of having this, where am I? No, not this here. Instead of this, generate random array that is going to be anything. I'm just going to generate random arrays of students. So I'm just going to create new student. And in a new student, remember, I have these as a constructor. So in the constructor, this is going to be my ID, which is this random number. And then I need to have a name. I'm just going to leave it like this. And then the GPA -1. Because I'm not interested into the rest, but I'm just interested into just showing you how this thing works with any object that is going to be comparable. Now I can just maybe remove these things and have maybe in the class student a constructor that is going to only initialize the ID. So if I have only the ID, the name, I'm going to make it empty, for example. And then the GPA, I'll put -1. So now if I'm just calling this new student with only one int as an argument, I'm just calling the constructor that takes only the int. And then this is going to generate many students, I mean with this size of students, with different IDs. Each ID is going to be randomly selected, and then it is going to return that array, which is a comparable. Now this comparable, see, is going to be a generate random array of students. This is what it's going to be. I'm just going to rename it so I can make it clear. Random student array. So now that I have that, I just need to display the array. But display array was meant to take as an argument an int. Now I'm just going to make it take any comparable, anything that is going to be comparable, or in this case it can be also any object. I can display any object because I don't need to compare anything here, so I can just use object. It will be fine. And that's all I need. Okay, this thing here, yeah, I don't need it now. I'll just going to remove that. So now I have this to be working. To do the same here, I'm just going to make comparable, and then maybe just copy this thing and make it in the other sign, in the other direction. So this is going to be like greater than 0, and instead of max, it's min. And comparable here. Now I have the selection sort descending and ascending, all of them just taken comparable. And if I run these, now I'm just going to have, okay, that's 30, that's way too much. I'm just going to display this in a different way. Now because these are array of students, the toString is going to be called, and I would like to display them in a line, each one in a separate line, instead of being all in the same line, because it's going to be too crowded. Okay, random of 0, okay, that's not what I meant. 10, or maybe 5 is enough. 10 is okay. Now let's do that. Now this is what I have. These are the students before. All of them, as you can see, they're empty and GPA -1 because I called the constructor with the empty and GPA -1. Now they are all sorted based on their ID, as you can see. Yeah.
Can you explain the difference between comparable and object?
Well, comparable is an interface that needs. Okay, hold on. Let me show this. Comparable is is an interface that is needing that each one implements that comparable to have the compare to. Now, why I need comparable here is that can I use object? Well, the problem with object is that, well, I can fix this here by doing this, but how can I fix this? Object do not have compare to. Well, but I'm not checking if they are equal. I'm checking which one is smaller than the other. So I need it to be comparable. So that's why now by putting it comparable, I can have access to this method. That's why I need this comparable thing, because I want to have this. Yes. It's not working with object. Okay, now if I put, for example, object here, and then do this to be smaller than the other, right? That was the question. How can you have two objects, one smaller than this one? This works with primitive data types. It does not work with objects. Less than, greater than. If you want to use that, well, it only works with int, double, float, something like that. Primitive data types. So I need something else. The something else is the compare to. So the compare to is doing the same job as this lesser than, greater than. But I cannot have compare to if the object is used. It has to be comparable, because comparable is an interface that has this compare to. And that's what I'm interested in. I just want to have this compare to. So now what I'm forcing, every class has to implement comparable. So I need, because every class, if it has to implement comparable, it will be having this method compare to that I need. Now every class of mine that I would like to be using, if it does not implement comparable, I'm not going to be able to use it here. But if it implements comparable, yeah, I can. Why I can? Because now I'm going to create an array of, for example, this generate array is going to generate an array of comparable. But check, the data type is comparable, but I'm putting new students inside of comparable. That's okay, because new student, since the class student is implementing comparable, it's like I'm putting an upcasting. I'm doing an upcasting. And that's possible. Upcasting is always possible. And it's always okay to upcast. And that's what I'm doing. That's why by using compare, I could have used this, for example, student. That would be fine too. I meant array here. It should return the array. So I could use student as well. So if I'm returning this generate an array of students, I can put that array of students into here, this comparable. Or maybe I can also put student here. But the comparable is more general, because anything can be comparable. If I have another class, then I'm going to put it inside comparable. It will work too. Is that okay? Because that's it about this thing.